Hello again. So here we are, chapter 7. And in this chapter, you're going to be studying support. Support that you can use for classroom-based assessment and for your large scale assessment. Um, eh, Remember that we're discussing assessment and instruction as something that is sort of very closely related. Assessing the student, assessing your practice, assessing what's effective. It's all pretty much on the same boat when we're dealing with assessing our students. So as you notice from this chapter, um, Professor Gottlieb puts a lot of emphasis on uh, instructional techniques that can be used for assessment as well. But since assessment, and particularly like a test form of assessment, at the end of an unit, summative assessment, it needs to reflect the instruction. An assessment must reflect instruction. Um, then it makes sense that a lot of the techniques that she suggests are both valid for instruction and assessing our students. She divides them into categories. I think graphic organizers, peer support or self-reflection for the students, um, and instructional techniques. And from this chapter, a couple of the things that I highlight, besides using graphic organizers and drawings and things like that when you're teaching subject matters, we do know those are incredibly effective and useful with all populations of students, everybody. uh, you know um, Kinesthetic learners, audiovisual learners, you remember different learning styles and how students respond to material differently. So the more support you use, the better for everybody. All the students win. It's a matter of different supports and different manners to present the information so it can reach everybody. So that, I don't know. I think that we all of us teacher use that daily. I don't think any of us is the sage on the stage, just stands up and just delivers a lesson, expects everybody to just understand us. We use manipulatives, realia, all kinds of things, graphic organizers, all kinds of things that people use these days. Professor Goliath has a number of suggestions, really useful. But from this chapter, in terms of instructional techniques, um, I like to discuss the concept of scaffolding because it is mentioned in the chapter within the instructional techniques. Also, the first was the graphic, the diagrams and things like that, support that you can use. Then you can also use a third category that Professor Gottlieb mentions, is the category of peer review and group interaction. And excuse me, there's some strategies to make those group and those reviews more effective. And also self-review, right? You have that activity, that KWH, what you know, what you learn, what you wish to learn more about, and how you're going to get to that. These kinds of things that you can share with your students so that they can engage in some level of self-awareness about their own learning. These are all very effective tools. She also mentions support for large-scale assessment. We do have a chapter on large-scale assessment, but she mentions here, accommodations like dictionaries, glossaries, and such. And we'll discuss more of that in the large-scale assessment, the standardized assessment chapter. But from this chapter, as I said, from the instructional techniques, I like to dig more into the concept of scaffolding. We know scaffolding is an instructional technique that is very useful with all populations of students, particularly ELLs. And if I were to ask you, what do you understand by scaffolding? Chances are we all have our own understanding of it. So I want to share my own with you. And I link it to a couple of concepts that you studied in your Intro to Bilingual Ed and in your second language acquisition courses. I link scaffolding to Vygotsky's ZPDs, Zones of Proximal Development, and I link it to Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis, I+1. Starting from the biggest to the more concrete, Vygotsky theoretically theorized that humans, we all have these zones of proximal development. We are in a particular stage in our growth, in our learning, in our acquisition of knowledge, and there is always another zone of proximal development linked to it, the next step. If I move it to language acquisition, I can apply that to Stephen Krashen. Input hypothesis, I plus 1. I is the current information that the student has. Plus 1 is the new input that we need to put into the student. No, it's not I plus 3. You don't want to take the student too far into the steps that you're going to lose them. So you want to go I plus 1. Find that next logical zone, that proximal zone from where they are. That's what I understand as scaffold. We provide the support, we put them at a level, and then our job is to take them to that next stage. We need to not too far up that we lose them, not to keep it status quo. We need to keep challenging and keep elevating. And that's how the scaffold comes through. And then some people like removing the scaffold, other people just keep it in there. Technically, we're supposed to remove support as we move ahead. But that's how I see it, is that logical next stage that the student is going to be in language acquisition, in subject matter, and how this looks in the classroom. That's your task. I just described to you at the theoretical level how that I plus 1 and that zone of proximal development and scaffolding manifest in the classroom. That's your task. So anyway, that's in a sense chapter 7. If we need to discuss more of this in class, we will. See you then. Adios.